Yeah, people have the impression that I'm always practicing.
Are you not? Welcome back to a new season of Classical Chats. I'm Tiffany. We're currently in New York filming in-person episodes. Very excited for you to watch this new setup. Special thanks to Rare Violins of New York for letting me film this season of in-person chats. Hi, introduce yourself, please.
Okay, my name is Zlatomir. I'm a cellist. I live in New York. I began playing the cello when I was 3. And I've been playing ever since.
You're very modest. Is it fine that I bring up that you won Tchaikovsky? Or is it like stop talking about it kind of situation?
It's fine. You can. It's your podcast. You can bring up whatever you want.
Well, I mean, I'm just trying to list out facts. You know, if you ask ChatGPT, who is Zlatomir Fung?
Right.
That might come up.
That's true.
So I got to be better than ChatGPT. So I guess welcome to Classical Chats, and it's fun to start this again. And this will be the first episode of the new season.
Wonderful.
So we kind of ran into each other very randomly, so I thought you'd be an interesting person to talk with. And so, yeah, let's get started. What is your first experience with classical? You mentioned that you started when you were 3.
Mm-hmm.
Because?
Well, both of my parents were mathematicians, and there was always, I guess one could say, an appreciation for classical music in my family. And I grew up with 3 siblings. I was the second oldest, and we all played a string instrument at some point. So when I was 3.5, I started playing the cello because my older sister was playing the violin. And I was living at the time with my family in Oregon. And there was a really fantastic Suzuki cello teacher that I started working with, and she was my first teacher. We worked together for 6.5 years. And that's how I got into classical music. And it's a funny thing because at least my experience, and I think this is the case with a lot of people, it's that you don't really get into classical music. You sort of get into an instrument, and then you realize that the best literature for the instrument is classical music.
True. So how did you pick the cello? You must have had, what, a quarter size?
Yeah, very small.
Because a 3-year-old plus a cello, that's like your entire height, no?
Yeah, I mean, it was basically just like a toy at the time.
But did you have a choice to pick the cello?
No.
Oh.
No.
You were like, that's fine.
Yeah, but I mean, it's one of those things where sometimes when you look back, you wish that you could have chosen. But
would you have chosen something else?
For sure.
Really?
For sure.
Oh, didn't you just say piano?
Absolutely. I'm envious of your
He's
pianist.
very happy to hear that in the background. So you just kept playing because you were a good child, or because your parents were mathematicians, but they wanted you to learn music, or?
Yeah, it was like an extracurricular activity at the beginning.
And then you just kept playing, and then you're like, this is my job.
Right.
Seriously?
Yeah, I mean, at some point, you sort of devote enough time to it that, like, when you're 12 or 13, you like start to think maybe it could be a profession. It's kind of a weird thought to have at the beginning.
Yeah, that's why, I mean, in a way, it's also the same with me, where I just kept playing and then it kind of became my job. But There was definitely like a decisive moment because I did have to move from home to New York, so that's a big decision. But even at the time, even when I came to Juilliard pre-college, it wasn't like, I know what it means to be a pianist for my career. It was just kind of like developing. So you just kept playing.
Yeah, I think so. Well, at a certain point, when you're that invested in something and you've taken it to a certain level, other people start to encourage you. So I think that's sort of what happened with me. Teachers who were pushing me to become more serious,
and you were just like, sure.
I was like, yeah, bring it on.
Did you never
Give me the challenge.
have like the rebellious phase as a teenager?
I did, of course. Yeah.
But not against the cello.
Against the cello.
Oh.
Yeah, when I was, I guess it was 15, I was at the Aspen Music Festival, and I remember I just came into one lesson for my teacher, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I just want to quit the cello. I was like in tears, basically. It was like the first time I been that vulnerable with him.
Did something happen, or?
It was a combination of different factors, but sort of the pressure that I was feeling from the festival, and at that time in your life, when other people sort of see something in you, there's a lot of chatter. There's like, oh, it's like really talented or whatever, and it's a lot of pressure to harbor, like to say, oh, I got to live up to those expectations.
So how did you resolve that?
Just with time.
This time.
Yeah.
Did you take time away?
No, but I
So you're just like, I want to quit. I'm gonna keep
exactly.
playing. That's interesting.
Every day I had to wake up and, well, I remember reading this interview with the cellist Gary Hoffman around the same time, and he said, every day for me the struggle is whether I should give it up or not. And I found that kind of weirdly inspiring as like a 15-year-old cellist, because here he was, in his 50s or whatever, and he was like still grappling with that same question.
So walk me through. 15, you're in Aspen. Did you go to conservatory or?
I went to Juilliard when I was 18.
Okay, so for college.
Right.
But before that, you were taking private lessons.
Right, and I was also at the NEC prep school in Boston.
Okay, NEC. I didn't know you went to NEC.
Yeah, I grew up I consider myself to have grown up in Boston. My family moved there when I was 9.
Okay. How do you find Boston compared to New York?
I like it. I mean, they're different
You're
cities.
too PC.
I'm too diplomatic. I know. Yeah,
I know. It's my mission today to crack. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. So, what happened when you were 18?
Went to school at Juilliard, and had a normal bachelor's degree, I guess, except for the fact that it was disturbed by the pandemic in my junior year.
Okay. But didn't you go to the competition before that?
At the end of my sophomore year.
Okay. Can I ask you about it?
Sure. Although I don't want to talk so much about myself.
Well, it's not about you, okay?
Okay, sure.
It's about sharing something helpful for others. So, because, you actually went to the final round and actually, got the coveted prize. And I can't say that about myself or any major competition. I'm kind of the famous loser. But, walk me through how you felt. What was it like to prepare? Why did you decide to pursue it, especially since, just a couple years you had a difficult period deciding what you're going to do with the cello.
Right.
So.
Yeah, so it was, I think, the biggest competition that I've done. It was a lot of preparation because over the course of 3 rounds, I had to work on about 2.5 hours of music, which actually for a pianist is I think, pianists do a lot more marathon type things, but for cellists, it's a lot. We're more feeble.
But no, it is a lot of repertoire. And actually, now that I'm not competing, I look back at competition repertoire because sometimes I get spam emails and they're like, come to this competition. And I look just curious what the repertoire is, and it's a lot of music. And I'm like, when I'm preparing for concerts, I'm not preparing the same amount at the same time like that.
Right.
At least not for myself. So
Right.
Anyway, about you.
Yeah, so...
How long did you take to prepare all of that?
Well, I think it was a combination of different things because a lot of the repertoire that I played at the competition was stuff that I had been performing a lot for the prior 6 months.
Yeah.
But I had about, I'd say 4 weeks, because the competition was in mid-June, and early to mid-May, that's when I started going full preparation mode. Yeah, and then I went to the competition. It was very interesting to play there in Russia.
Were you nervous?
Very nervous.
How did you overcome that?
Well, I think that the nerves, they affect you most in the time between the performances, because once you're there on stage, in the flow of the performance, you don't really have time to be nervous. That's the way I've always related to nerves.
Interesting. So you just don't have nerves when you're playing.
Right. Or I guess you could say that the nerves become channeled into your focus.
No, it's interesting. It's been a long time since I've competed, and I can't say that, whatever it is that I went through is really helpful for anyone since I again, didn't win first prize at a prestigious competition. So, do you play differently then? Or do you remember when you played at the competition?
Yeah,
That's different from performing.
I think the competition is a bit of a different experience because it's in a recital hall and there are people there. So it really feels like a recital. You can't really see where the jury is sitting. They're kind of like in the middle of the audience. So I just, played how I think I would have normally in a performance.
And then you won. And then...
I mean, it's always a combination of luck and...
Yeah, of course. No, but I think it's...
You need a lot of luck, good luck, and I don't know. It's like, I feel very blessed to have done well in that and other competitions, but yeah.
Was it how you had imagined it to be? Preparing for a competition?
Yeah. Well, it's always a little different than you imagine,
In what ways?
Well, I find that, you build up something so much in your head, and then when you get there, the hall feels totally different because every hall has its own energy. Every audience has its own energy, and you just kind of have to hope that the energy agrees with your energy.
What is your energy?
I don't know if I could put a word on it, like to describe it, but like the way that you project your music, like some halls, they just kind of swallow it up, right? But other halls, they give it back to you, and that's really a nice feeling. I think that's what makes a hall a good hall.
I'm trying to think if piano sounds get swallowed in a hall. The traffic says no. Because I think it's very easy for a cello to... Wait, this way.
Right.
This way. I play the cello. Yeah, I think it's easier for a single line of melody and resonance to get drawn out in a bad acoustics.
Right.
So,
right.
What would you say to someone that's preparing for a competition then? There's the unselfish part.
Yeah, sure.
Why I'm asking you all this.
I think the first thing to think about is like you have to ask yourself why you're doing the competition, right? Because I've talked to a lot of people and they go into the competition with the wrong mindset. They go into it thinking that it's like an all or nothing thing, and they go into it because of their parents or because of their teacher. And I think whenever you have a motivation like that, it's sort of like you're being pushed into the experience. It's difficult to have a healthy attitude toward the way that you're performing because you feel like you owe something to somebody with the way that you play. So I think that if ideally, and when I went into competitions, I was always thinking about it in terms of this is like kind of a stepping stone for me. I can use this opportunity to improve, to learn new repertoire, to gain more experience, which is really an important thing for me, to build my confidence. All those things, I think, the more growth-oriented reasons tend to be, I think, the ones that you need to search for if you're considering entering a competition. Yeah, so that's my first piece of advice. And then second piece of advice is, it's difficult, of course, but you can't fixate on the result. It's, of course, like, it's sort of, it might feel weird for someone who's like done really well.
Say that.
Yeah, exactly. For someone who's like won competitions to say that, because the result for me was like usually positive, but.
But you've entered competitions before that, or no?
Yeah, I entered a lot.
Have you lost?
I lost. Yes, there were a couple that I lost.
So okay, yeah. He's still human. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, but it also applies, I think, to your whole relationship with music. Also, you sort of have to have the right reason.
But did you have a reason? I mean, I'm sure you did, but you kind of went into the cello as a 3-year-old, being like, I'm a good boy.
Right.
I'm gonna keep continuing, even when I want to quit.
Right.
So, at what point did you really have a deep passion for music and for the cello?
Well, I think it's sort of like waves in the ocean, because there's certain moments where you really feel like you're back to that dark place where you don't see the purpose of what you're doing. But then sometimes you'll have like this ray of sunlight, or you'll meet someone who will just spark something in you and like make you realize how much you love music or whatever, or you have a great teacher or a friend, or you see a performance. And then I think over time, those moments become if you're immersed in the world of doing what you love, those moments become more frequent, and then they sort of become touchstones for you when you risk going back to that place where it's all defeatist and, you know, sort of pessimistic and negative. So like now, like when I wake up, like, of course, there's still a part of me that's like, well, I should just quit, you know, like I'm not improving, whatever.
I do remember you saying something like this in August, actually. We didn't play together, but we were both at Mordsburg Festival, and yes, you made a joke about this.
Yeah, I mean, in every joke is a kernel of truth, right?
Of course.
So
Well, the piano is behind you if you want to make your debut.
yeah.
But why?
Because in our process practicing every day, we're constantly confronted with, if we have the attitude where we're always trying to improve, we're constantly confronted with inadequacy, right? Because there's a gap between where we want to be and where we are. So the question is how you react to the gap.
You're such a pessimist. You see a gap. I mean, I can be pessimistic, and my friends know I have done many, many hours of crying and pessimism, but you see a gap. I see recognizing that you can reach something higher than what it is. So rather than feeling inadequate, you're actually feeling ambitious.
Sure, you're right.
But you're like, no,
Well,
inadequacy.
That's what I think the touchstones are for, because
So-
they make you see the inadequacy in a different way.
But that's external.
The touch, you mean like
The touchstones.
Well, I feel like you can root them in yourself if you have really deep experience. Like, for example,
Yeah, you got to give me some examples.
give you an
because
example.
I'm like, are you putting a stone inside yourself? Like, get in so that I can be inspired? Like, it sounds a little bit aggressive.
like for example, it's dependent on what you're doing. But like for example, at Juilliard, I had a music history professor that like really changed my life. And this professor made me see the way that music was evolving, let's say from like 1850 to the present, in a way that I never thought about it before. So now whenever I play Shostakovich or Prokofiev or Tchaikovsky or whatever, I think about that lineage and that inspires me, you know, and it makes me feel like that there's some meaning to what I'm doing. So, you know, like if I'm playing the Rococo variations and I kind of like, I'm having trouble with the octaves at the end, then I think back to like how we talked about Tchaikovsky in the class. So that's sort of what I mean by like a touchstone. And then it gives me strength to go on practicing the octaves.
Interesting. No, because I think people are going to love you for, you know, saying very relatable struggles, experiences, you know, things like this. But I'm very curious what your teacher said in the class about Tchaikovsky that would be like, aha, that's why I should keep going.
Well, it's not. Well, it's interesting because like I don't remember exactly what was said. You know, it's sort of more like it was the feeling, and I feel like that's also the way that we remember things as human beings. Like we have that feeling. The feeling is the thing that leaves us last. You know, 'cause we sometimes might not remember like if a person told us a particular thing, but it's like they made us feel like we were special, or they made us feel like we were lonely, or unimportant, right? Like all these strong feelings that like linger with you. So it's like the positive feelings, like making us feel like powerful in a way to influence things with our music.
Do you think you're powerful too?
Well, I think that when you're making music in a way that is ambitious, as you said, like when you're trying to do justice, there's a power to that. It's not like a forceful power, but it's like a beauteous power that expands.
Elegance vocabulary. No, it's great. Yeah, I don't think I would be able to come up with eloquent answers. People, you know, are like, oh yeah, he plays very elegantly, very eloquent. So it makes sense. Since you've won a competition, you know, you've had your concertizing career for a couple of years. How has it been since pre-career, I guess?
Yeah.
Is it what you imagine it to be? Kind of the same question as the competition. But
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, you're asking me, you know, what is the demographic watching this? So I think a lot of people who watch this are aspiring musicians. And they want to know, what's it like after you get the grand prize? And is it everything that you dream of when you were a kid?
Right.
If you did have a dream, I don't know what it was like for you.
Well, I think that it was just the beginning, you know, because when you're preparing for something like that, you tend to see it as an end point, but then like once it's over, even if the result was positive, the larger question is like, well, what do you do now? How do you go forward, right? Because competitions are all about external validation of your ability or whatever, your music. When you're concertizing, when you're going out in the world, there is some of that, with reviews and conductors you work with or whatever. But I think a lot of it is actually just you finding a way to sort of be okay with yourself on a daily basis. Because every concert that you give, like sometimes you come and it's like a terrible hall, or the piano's out of tune. There's all sorts of things you can't control, or it's like, your luggage was lost or the flight was delayed. All sorts of things can happen, and you show up sometimes and you can't give 100%, right? So the question is like, even throughout all that, how do you have the perseverance to go forward? So anyway, to answer your question in a very long-winded sense, my hope is that one day, if I'm doing a podcast like this, that the Tchaikovsky competition wouldn't even be mentioned.
You have the option to not.
No. But of course, it should be mentioned now. But I'm hoping essentially that whatever I do with music and whatever else can be rich enough and substantial enough to render the external validation that set it all in motion sort of obsolete.
Well,
Yes.
we're not going to talk about Tchaikovsky anymore.
Okay, sure. Well, no, but thank you for asking. I do enjoy talking about it to an extent.
No, I think it's just I don't think many people are very open, to talking about their experiences. You do that quite a bit on Instagram. Mm-hmm. You always pop up on my Explore feed before you get. I'm like, does cellist is always practicing?
Yeah, people have the impression that I'm always practicing.
Are you not? How much do you practice? Just to balance out this image that you are already claiming that you probably have.
Well, my answer used to be a certain number of hours, but now I answer this in a different way, which I think is actually more truthful, which is that I practice as much as I can.
What was your previous answer?
3 to 4 hours a day.
And then how much is it actually now?
It depends on the day.
Right,
and that's why I answer with as much as I can, because sometimes you can only practice 30 minutes. If you have other things or travel or whatever. But I think I like to think of practicing as like your whole life is one long practice session. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, it never really begins and ends. So to think of it in terms of days, it's more like the investment that you have in the process of constantly looking for more in your playing.
Yeah. Or acknowledging your own inadequacy, I guess.
Pardon the interruption. Have you been enjoying this Classical Chats episode? If you have, please consider donating to support Classical Chats. We're very lucky to be able to film here for free at Rare Violins of New York. Hopefully one day we can make it even better and bring it to the road. So, link is in the description if you would like to support Classical Chats. Thank you!
No, but...
Well, I mean, acknowledging is only the first step, right? Because then you have
what's
to...
the second?
The second step is to be emboldened by the ambition that it inspires in you.
See, I don't really think of step one. I'm usually at step two, not to say that I'm like a very
That's good. That's
arrogant
great.
person, but no, I think a lot of people have, set those, especially people who are trying to get better and shoot for a goal that they have, whether it's winning a competition or getting into something that they want to be part of musically. I think a lot of people would be like, oh, I feel like I can't do it.
Right.
Because I recognize something greater that I'm not achieving. So I think this feeling is totally valid, and I don't know. I just like to tease you a lot for some reason. It's like, I don't know why. So what do you want to talk about after, the talk about career? You're like, I don't want to talk about myself.
Well, let's talk about like what you see as the role of classical music, and then I don't know, we can just have a conversation about, because I find it really interesting. I've always felt that classical music is on the fringe.
What does that mean?
I think it means that it hasn't and won't in the future ever receive the kind of widespread appreciation that the people who know and love it believe that it deserves, at least in the contexts that we consider it to be most true in. Like, for example, going to a 2-hour concert at Carnegie Hall or whatever. Yeah, what's interesting is like I find interesting is that. Sorry, now I'm just kind of going on my own spiel, but
Oh, this is a lot more interesting. I'm here for So before we started filming, he was like, "Don't ask me about this because I'll be very pessimistic." So I didn't even have to crack him.
yeah, right.
Please continue. It's interesting.
So I find it interesting, like because I'm on YouTube a lot, right?
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes like I'll go to like let's say like the Foray Pavant or something, like a piece that's like well known, right? You go in the comments section and you see like, thank you to like such and such a video game for introducing me to this piece. I'm sure you've seen those comments,
Yeah.
right? And then that comment has like 1,000 likes, right? So there are a lot of people who have this experience of like they are hooked by something, but it's in like not at all the context like going to Carnegie Hall for a 2-hour concert.
Is that bad?
I don't think that's bad at all, but I think that what that means is essentially because we, at least the work that I'm in, like the line of work that I'm in is giving 2-hour concerts, right? I'm not in the line of work of matching the Foray Pavant to video games.
But then those people could be going to your next concert if you're playing Foray.
Well, for me, that's the question, right? Like how much is there really a retentive quality to that experience?
You sound like some industry people who have questioned me and my work. So, you see if there's a huge difference between us. I think yes.
Well, I hope you're right. Yeah, I mean,
What makes you this pessimistic though? Like what makes you doubt that something is not going to carry over?
well,
Because it's like watching a commercial. You see, I don't know why I'm thinking about toothpaste, but like, you watch a toothpaste commercial, and then next time you're in the grocery store, they are hoping that because you've seen that ad, you'll think of their brand.
right.
I don't actually. I've never seen a toothpaste. I don't know why I'm thinking about toothpaste, but just an ad about any product.
Right, that basically like the video game thing is an advertisement for the Carnegie Hall.
And directly, yeah.
Right. So to use another example of an art form that I love, which is film.
Oh, I had a question about that.
So, there's all this talk now about like the big box office movies versus like the independent art movies, right?
Yes.
And a lot of the art movies, even if they have big budgets, they're like wildly commercially unsuccessful. And there were a lot of those movies last year, for example. But yet, the critics hate the Marvel movies. I mean, at least the recent ones, or the superhero movies, and they love these ones that are not doing well, right? And I asked the same question. I asked like, well, why is it that people don't want to watch the quote unquote good movies? They want to watch the movies that are just like theme parks or whatever. And I see that and I say, well, I think there must be something about like really great or aesthetic experiences that's just difficult in a way to sell, because something about it transcends selling. It transcends economics. It has to do with something that's incredibly intimate and individual to every person that experiences it. Like the experience that you have with the Schumann Kindersonnet. I'm sure it's a very intimate emotional experience,
Are you
right?
doubting my ability to sell Kindersonnet?
No, you've already sold Kindersonnet because you sold it to me at the beginning of all your vlogs.
Oh, you see?
Because every time I listen to one of your vlogs, I hear the theme song. I'm like, man, I should go listen to Horowitz.
Oh, okay. Well, yes, that is the goal though, that they get into it. You see, it does kind of work.
Right, but to my point, it's like the experience that you have and the experience that I have. Like we can talk about it, but no amount of words that we put on it will ever do justice to it, right?
Yeah.
It's like this kind of, it's so deep and it's so special.
It's not the most deep at all times, though. Come on, so like some of the melodies in Mozart or
Right.
Haydn is just like jokes and humorous and
Right.
silly at times. But counter argument, not argument. We're not arguing, but just because you were saying, oh, it's such a transcendent experience, aesthetic experiences that transcends selling or something like this. Have you seen the wave of meditation apps in the past couple of years?
I have, yeah. But to me, the thing is, it's
And just the
interesting you brought
trend
that
of
up.
meditating and self-care and
It's interesting you bring that up because to me, I see a very disturbing trend with this, which is what I would call like the Tik-Tokification of, let's say, mindfulness or whatever, where people are like, oh, just do this and then this will be You're going to
Yeah.
be good. Like do like 10 minutes of meditation a day, you're good. But it's never that simple. And I think anyone who's ever tried to do that knows that it's not that simple.
I mean, it's the same with. I mean, I don't mean to criticize people because that's not the point. But just I feel the same about classical music content. A lot of times they're like, these are the 3 hacks to play the fastest.
Right.
Or it's all very short and sensationalized.
Right.
It's interesting that you have this whole pessimistic look on the Tik-Tokification, whatever you call it.
Yeah. Well, of everything that's meaningful, I think.
Yeah. So past 2 days, I spent many hours looking back at all these video diaries I made about my Schumann process and the album that's coming out, and I spent so much of those time talking about how much I hate the way classical music is presented on social media and this trend of oversimplifying things.
Right.
So I get you. But also, you're still posting on Instagram.
Right. Well, for me, my audience on Instagram are people who are cellists, pretty much. And I know that limits my audience immensely, but
Does it?
I think so.
I'm sure many people play the cello.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of cellists, but there are more people who don't play the cello that might be interested in the cello that because the kinds of captions that I put are like highly technical things about like my bow hold or whatever. And, I do it for a very select audience, but I feel like that's what I want to do. So I think we had this discussion before, but it's like, I just do what I want to do. And I want to talk about, bow holds and great recordings and other stuff. Like, and maybe there are like 4 people who are also interested in that, but like, I want to talk to those 4 people.
So you're the opposite of oversimplification.
I'm like overcomplication. Yeah.
It's a great soundbite.
As I was saying with like the quick fixes, right? It's sort of like the discourse of the internet, the way that, people, they sort of, exactly as you were saying, it's like they oversimplify a process that is actually very complex. Like the process of, let's say, for example, overcoming your traumas, right? Or learning to be at peace with your anxiety. Like that's the kind of stuff that, takes a lot of contemplation to achieve. And just like, it takes a lot of contemplation in a way to, like sit through a Mahler symphony. It's not like you can try to sell it with like the best 2 minutes, but in essence, the piece is not just its best 2 minutes. It's the whole. And then the 2 minutes have more meaning within the whole.
So is your solution by overcomplicating it? To balance it out?
I don't pretend to provide any solutions for the problem.
Well, you must still have some sort of goal or just something that's motivating you to keep participating in something that you think is kind of not dying, but just limited.
Well, what motivates me is my own personal interest in it and the fact that there are maybe a handful of people out there. Maybe there are more than a handful. I don't know. I'd be thrilled if there were. That also share the same like deep love that I do for like nerdy cello technique questions. Stuff
Well,
like that.
if anyone is a nerdy cellist, you should follow him on Instagram. He's probably the most nerdy cellist account.
Here's another thought about the question. It's like, why is it that sports are so popular? Like so many people love, even though like some sports I think at times can also be boring. Like baseball can be pretty boring at times. But the thing that's great about sports is that there's an easily identifiable result. There's a sense that like there's a winner and a loser, and you can put yourself behind one of the competing forces, right? But when you're listening to a piece, there's not that sense of the outcome, because what is the outcome? The outcome is what I was referring to, that deep aesthetic experience, ideally, which kind of resists public discussion. It's very personal.
Does it resist public discussion? We are having a discussion publicly.
Right, but I won't try to explain how I feel about the Schumann Kindersenden. I mean, I could, but again, it wouldn't do justice to it, right? It's like I would tell you, go listen to it, and you'd be like, yeah, you should go listen to it too, and then we can commune in that.
I mean, I'm somewhere in the middle, just because I think, yes, I could see, even though I am totally with you, I don't like the oversimplification and the whole quick fixes trend, but I think for a lot of people, they might not realize that those are actually just very easily digestible hooks into something further.
Right.
So it doesn't necessarily mean just because they came across very simplified version of the bigger, more wholesome thing that it kind of stops them from actually appreciating it down the line or, the next second.
Right.
So I kind of think it's all due.
No, I mean, I think you also, the work that you're doing is a great example of that. It's a great example that the futility that I seem to be professing is not actually is not actually that dire. You know what I mean?
But when did you start feeling this way, though? You weren't like this when you were 3. Or did you like, this is terrible, I'm getting into something that is just pointless?
Well, one of the things that concerns me a little bit, sorry, I'm talking all about my negative concerns and everything, is that I feel like
Halloween.
Yeah,
Let it all come out. All the darkness.
I feel like there's a lack of innovation in in the direction of classical music, because ultimately we're preserving something that's kind of antiquated. It's kind of like, how when people go to Paris, like they go to the Louvre, right? Right? Or they go to the Orsay Museum. And it's like 99.9% of the people that go in there, they don't, myself included, like they don't understand like practically anything about what they're seeing. But they go because it's in the touristic guides, So the question is, do we want to be like the tourist guides and bring people to classical music like they would go to the Louvre, but they would still not really know what they're seeing? I mean, that would be great, right? Because sometimes people, they don't know what they're seeing the first time, but then the second, third, fourth time, then they see more and it inspires them to learn more about art, right? But my point is that I think that 99% is just a fact about like art. It's like, it's difficult. It requires a lot of attention, and a lot of people don't want to give that attention, or like the appreciation of like the understanding the history. Like when you look at the Mona Lisa, it's like everyone is there taking photos, but like, what are they taking photos of? They're taking photos of the experience, not the actual art.
Does it matter?
That's a question. I don't know.
I know, that's my question to you.
From an economic perspective, it doesn't matter because they bought the ticket for the museum, right? But from a puristic aesthetic perspective, yeah, they're not really experiencing the Mona Lisa.
Would you call yourself a purist?
Maybe in some sense. I don't know.
I know it's a very controversial term I've noticed on social media.
Well, then I'm not a purist.
Hey,
I don't want to be controversial.
Right, gotta keep it PC.
Said
It
too
is an
much.
interesting situation that I saw. I mean, I try to stay off of analyzing every single piece of content I see on social media. Just I don't want to be influenced by what's trendy and just do my own thing. But
Right.
I remember seeing this coming up on Instagram, just these people making fun of purist versus non-purist.
Mm-hmm.
And it was this discussion about people being too puristic or just, it's not art and it's not aesthetic if you experience it a certain way, or if you play a certain way. And I felt uncomfortable watching that, not because I felt like I was a purist, but it kind of cheapened the complexity, I think, of the discussion of, because ultimately I think it's about what is music, and it's going to be different for everybody's experiences, just like what is art, that's going to mean something different, I think, for everybody. And to make it into a bipolar discussion just like that in 30 seconds, I think it's
Right.
it feels a little bit wrong. But that's just my take. I'm not totally pessimistic.
I think, well, you make me optimistic. The stuff that you're doing, it's like, yeah, because for example, when you did the Dream Stage concert during the pandemic, I remember just kind of being really impressed by like how many
watched?
people. I didn't watch it, but I saw that it happened. But I remember being really impressed because
I didn't see yours either.
No, but I was impressed by the enthusiasm that your fans had. Because actually,
I didn't do anything. They did all the enthusiastic applauding and the support. So
right, but I remember the chats. Like I remember the there was one live stream. I can't remember which one it was, but anyway, they were all like,
never sleeps.
maybe it was that one, but it was all like
hated on.
Well, forget the haters. It's Those are the real purists. Like, why would you rain on someone else's enthusiasm?
That's a whole different off-the-record discussion.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, no, it's definitely an interesting discussion. I don't know how to bring us back up into the neutral level of discussion because we've kind of gone deep into more critical aspects of classical music.
Right.
And I guess you're saying that you keep going because of your interest and just...
Yeah, and also the faith that I think when people really want that experience, that we can, as musicians, give it to them. And I think there's something that we're basically providing a service to make that there for them.
It sounds almost capitalistic. We're providing a service.
Well, we are just like the Louvre is providing a service by hanging up the Mona Lisa. You know, it could be in a private collection, right? But
yeah, I suppose.
So yeah, for me, it's that. It's like the one-on-one.
But you say it lacks innovation. In what sense? You composed, don't know?
I started again very recently, but yeah.
Is that what you mean by innovation or the lack of innovation? Because we're repeating.
Yeah, I mean that also. I mean, I think in a sense it's difficult also because people are afraid to be labeled as derivative. So they fear writing music that, you know, would, let's say, be of an earlier era in terms of its relationship to tonality, right? Because whenever you do something like that, immediately you're labeled as derivative.
Because everything's been done.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of the conflict. But it's because there's a pressure for everything to be new, right? Like, why can't we have more great music in the style of Beethoven, right? I'm sure there's great music to be written.
But you did just say that classical music suffers from the lack of innovativeness.
I think
so. It is newness that you're still after, no?
Right, but it's a different kind of newness than the one that we're getting right now.
What's the kind that we're getting right now?
We're getting newness for the sake of newness rather than newness because it's actually, I think, what people want to bring into the world compositionally. That's my feeling. And obviously, it's a gross generalization, and I hope I didn't offend anyone by saying that. But
I want to say I agree with you with the caveat that I don't compose myself, so I have no connections to composers really and that way of thinking. How did you get into composing?
Composing was actually for a long time a big part of my life as a musician. I started taking lessons when I was 10, I guess. So I studied that for like 3 or 4 years. And at that age, you know, when you're composing, it's like, yeah, you have no knowledge of like what you're doing practically. It's just all like intuition. And actually, to bring up another important issue that's facing our classical music world is I think that more players should be composers as well. The lack of the overlap between those two types of musicians has, I think, been a great detriment to our industry, if you want to call it an industry. Because on one hand, you have people who they sort of see the musical tradition as this static, ancient thing. And then they adopt, if you want to talk about purism, a very puristic attitude like, oh, you can only play Schumann this way, or you can only play Bach this way. But I think the moment that you kind of put pen to paper and you start writing music yourself, you realize that there's no such thing as like knowing 1,000% that this note can only be this way.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like writing a novel. Like, you know, people like, would you change that word? Yeah, sure. You could change the whole sentence. You could change the whole chapter. You know, it's like nothing is ever really set in stone. And so that's one aspect. And then the other aspect is I think that if performers played their own music more, that would be kind of like the Taylor Swift phenomenon. You know, it's like, I have to tell you, I'm just blown away by the Eras tour phenomenon. My father is a big Swiftie, yeah. But I'm actually thinking, because, you know, she's releasing the Taylor's version, and she just released 1989 Taylor's version. I'm thinking of maybe trying to do some cello arrangements of some of her stuff. Yeah.
If you want to blow up on social media, there you go.
Well,
I'm not even kidding.
but I mean, part of the reason why she's so successful is because her music is so personal.
Yeah. Wait, why do you want to make arrangements if you're not a Swiftie?
I could be a Swiftie. There's no barrier between me.
So you like her music?
I do like some of her music quite a bit, actually.
Okay, so that counts as, I think, a Swiftie. Hey, that's one label that I don't think anyone knows. You're you know, a half Swiftie.
I'm a half Swiftie.
Yeah, there you go. Me too. I was listening to her earlier today. Do you then perform your own compositions?
I haven't in a long time, but I'm hoping to rectify that.
So I was gonna ask, it'd be nice if we ended this with, a clip of your composition.
There's nothing really out there at the
Didn't write
moment.
any for the elves.
I did, but I'm not ready to play that.
Gotta wait till Christmas.
Yeah.
Darn. Do you want to talk about WQXR? What is that? What is it that you're doing with WQXR?
So this year I'm part of their Artist Propulsion Lab, which is basically like a residency where they give you the resources of the radio station. WQXR is the classical music radio station in New York. We were asked to sort of come up with projects, and they gave us free reign to do whatever we wanted. And I said, well, I want to write a radio drama for kids, which is based around Christmas. So I ended up writing this story that was sort of loosely based on a Brothers Grimm fairy tale about two elves who play the cello. And it turns out I'm also writing the music for it. So it's sort of like an hour-long Christmas special. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that whole production and also your music. Which,
Thank you.
Darn, we can't preview anything. But how would you like to let the world know us, as we're ending this conversation? You didn't want Tchaikovsky to be, your legacy. Totally get it. So what would you like to be known as?
I'm just a nerd. I'm a cello nerd. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's fair. Classical music involves nerds and non-nerds, so glad to have been a nerd. Any last words to the nerds out there?
No, I mean, I think that the only thing I'd say is it's really great what you're doing. I think, and as I said, what you're doing gives me cause to be optimistic.
I thought it was your Tchaikovsky class.
Well, I have multiple touchstones.
No, you're very kind. Thank you.
Let's conclude.
He wants to end the podcast, so let's end it.
It's been pretty long already.
No, it's actually
It's
we
substantial.
went so
We went pretty deep. Yeah.
which of course as expected. But yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Be kind, keep striving, guys.